I'm making an Attack on Titan fan game using the Unity game engine, and this is my progress so far. I actually started this game last year whenever I made the ODM gear in a week, but since the final season, well, the second final season is premiering now, I figured that it'd be cool to try to make that project a little bit more complete. So over the past week, I overhauled the visuals, movement system, and built an attack system in a Titan boss fight. And this is how. Day 1 wasn't actually a full day of work, but it was entirely dedicated to planning instead. I set up a board on Trello to keep track of the things I wanted to do, and then I tried dusting off the Unity project that I hadn't touched in a year. Surprisingly, the project still worked. If you haven't watched that old video, that's fine. You just need to know that it was basically just like ODM gear that you could move around. It was a pretty decent project, but it wasn't much of a game, more like just a fancy movement system, so I'm trying to build an actual game now. And surprisingly, after a year of non-use, the project still worked. I really don't know why I originally left the default skyboxes in the game as they look so bad, but I'll fix that soon. I have more important things to focus on first of all. But you know what you should focus on? Wishlisting my game Couch Combat on Steam. Yeah, I know, great transition, but seriously, my main project that I've been working on for 2 years is a split screen and soon to be online multiplayer FPS with a low poly art style. I'm making it based on feedback from my community in my comment section and on my Discord channel. Wishlisting really helps me even if you don't buy the game, because Steam will still improve its standing in the algorithm and will show it to more people on release. And having more wishlists is massive for an indie dev like me who doesn't have a publisher. But anyways, day 2 I started out by modeling the Titan. Modeling humanoid things is so much harder than environmental stuff, but I think that the Titan turned out pretty well. And yeah, I chose to model the Colossal Titan instead of a normal one. I know that doesn't make that much sense from a lore perspective, as the Colossal Titan is like a lot bigger than it is in game, plus it can make steam and stuff, but I chose to do the Colossal Titan instead for this week because it's just really iconic. Plus, there was a really good T-pose reference for it online. Okay, that reference is the main reason. Like seriously, 3D modeling is hard. But after I finished up the Titan, I put it into Mixamo. And I'm not gonna lie, Mixamo is seriously one of my favorite tools ever. Basically with Mixamo you can set it up and automatically rib humanoid characters without ever having to do it yourself. And if you don't know anything about 3D animation, just know that rigging is very boring and takes forever. So having a tool like this is incredibly nice. And Mixamo also has tons of free animations to use, which is also incredibly useful. After rigging the Titan, I put it into Unity and made it into a ragdoll. But I also made it so that I can disable that ragdoll and just use it for collision, so now you can climb on it. My plan for the Titan is to make it mostly IK driven. Inverse kinematics, or IK, is a really overly complicated game development and 3D animation term that basically just means that instead of manually rotating each bone to pose the arm or leg, you instead just have a target that the arm automatically reaches at. This can be used to make procedural animations within the game engine, and my plan is to make the Titan grab at the player with these procedural animations. I also want to make the legs IK, but that might not happen. But I got the basics for IK set up in Unity. I'm just using the built-in IK solution in Unity that I really wish I knew existed back whenever I was working on IK for Couch Combat, because I ended up building my entire own IK system for Couch Combat, and it's not very good and it took forever. But basically for this game, the Titan just stares at the player and also points his hand at the player, even when it's just a little bit out of his range of motion, but I'll fix that later. Day 3 was the day I had the most time to work on the game, so I really need to make the best of my time. I started by trying to fix a slight issue. Currently, the grappling hooks for the ODM gear are only designed to work with stuff that doesn't move, which really doesn't work with the Titan, so I need to fix that. Currently, the points which you are grappling onto are just positions, or vector 3s in the world, which means they can't be moved. So my solution was to make these into game objects that move around. This also allows me to make them child of objects, which means that they'll move with the object. So basically I just made these points check if the object that is being grappled to has a rigid body, which in my game, objects will not be moving if they don't have a rigid body. And if the object has a rigid body, then it makes itself a child of that object. And this makes it move with the object, which works really well and also allows you to pull smaller physics objects towards yourself, which could be really interesting if I add items of some sort to the game in the future. So after that little upgrade, I think it's time to give the Titan some actual behavior. So I decided to animate her, a movement script, and an eternal lust for human blood. For the movement script, I just made the Titan slowly turn to face the player and also constantly move forward. But now it's time to buckle down and do some IK. I hope this goes well. I first made the legs stay in place while the Titan moves by making them IK to a target on the ground, and then I updated these points to be underneath the Titan with a weight function. This made the Titan's feet snap to the new position instantly. But then I made the feet lerp and also tried to make them step by moving them to the height of the target on an animation curve. But the thing is, this really did not look very good, and despite how quickly I explained it, this took several hours. Eventually, I decided to cut my losses and just use animation instead of IK for the walking. So I took a walking animation off of Mixamo, slowed it down, and what do you know, it looks perfectly fine. So trying to do inverse kinematics for the legs was pretty much just a colossal waste of time. Yay. In order to make this animated walking look better, I added dust particles to spawn the Titan's feet and also added screen shape to the camera, and that looks pretty decent. Now that I have the Titan moving around, I need to make it possible to make it stop moving with a big shiny blade. Attacking will basically consist of holding control for a bit, which will launch you forward while activating a trigger collider on the player, and if you hit the collider on a Titan's nape, it will kill the Titan, which will just activate the ragdoll for now. And this wasn't too hard to code, and you can see it working here. It is currently pretty janky, as it's hard to see exactly where the nape is, and the movement needs a bit more polish too, so I decided to give you a bit more control by adding dashing in all 4 directions as well as up and down for the player. To make dashing, I made a script that listens for input, and then if it detects the double click of certain keys, then it will dash in the direction by setting the velocity of the rigid body to 0 and adding a force to the rigid body in the correct direction. And that works pretty well. The player attacks need animation, and this is kind of an issue for several reasons. One, I'm going to have to make these animations myself using Unity, so they might not look that great. But more importantly, I'm using a package called Invector for third-person movement. To be completely honest, it's not ideal. I put it in it a year ago, and if I was doing this project now, I would definitely not start with it. And if I had more time, I would probably replace it with a system I make from the ground up. But I only have a week, so I have to wait. So instead, I had to work around Invector. I spent hours trying to add an attack layer to the animation layers of the animator, but that just straight up would not work. I have no idea why, to be completely honest, but it really just would not work with Invector. So I set up a kind of gross workaround for now. I have another model for the player which I switched to when attacking, and I just animate that one instead. But I really needed to hurry up and move back to working on the Titan, so I settled with this. For the rest of day 5, I only had time to add a nice new skybox to the game and then make the Titan squat down when the player is low down enough. But tomorrow is my last real day of development, so I need to make some serious progress to call this anywhere near complete. I started day 6 by building a wall in Blender. I just made a single segment and gave it an array modifier along a circular curve, which looks pretty good. So then I imported it into Unity, and after a bit of time spent messing around with colliders and scaling, I had a pretty good looking stage. And then it was time to try and improve the Titan's behavior. I started off by removing the squat behavior because it really doesn't look good or work, and then I began to set up the Titan's eating behavior. It's honestly pretty simple. I just added a player model as a child of the Titan hand bone, and then I made a really crappy animation for the Titan eating, but it looks fine in the game, so whatever. Finally, I just disabled the player and their camera and enabled a camera that follows the player model that's being eaten. The rotation is pretty funky, but whatever, it's kind of funny. The player gets 8 whenever they hit a collider that's on the Titan's right hand, and I would have also done the left hand, but it doesn't really move, and that would have required a lot more animation, so whatever. And then to improve the Titan's behavior, I messed around with the IK of the Titan's hand and made an alert towards the player, which works somewhat well, and in order to keep the Titan from reaching behind its back, I use this weird dot product equation that returns a positive value whenever the player is in front of the Titan and a negative one when the player is behind. And apparently dot products are a Calculus 3 concept, so I really don't know how they work. But if it works, who really needs to understand their code anyways? I finished up by adding particles when the player kills a Titan or is eaten. Then I got to adding sound effects. Finding the right sound effects took a bit of time, but thanks to some cool people on YouTube who isolated things like the ODM gear sounds, I managed to get it all sounding pretty good using Audition. And here's the final product of this week of work. I'm pretty proud of how much I got done, but it still has obvious issues. The Titan's behavior is a bit strange, and if you're near the ground, it basically can't hurt you. Furthermore, the arm teleports around weirdly sometimes, which really shouldn't happen. So I at least want to fix things like that before I publish the game for free. And I do think it would be cool to finish this game and make it into like a wave-based arcade game where you can transform into the attack Titan for a bit of time whenever you get a kill streak and stuff, which sounds like a fun project to do. But couch combat is first priority, so that won't be happening yet. But be sure to subscribe and comment if you do want the game though, and if I get enough support then I'll be sure to do it and release it for free. And then on day 7, I just made the video that you are currently watching. Thanks to my Patreon, Howard House. Bye.